What's going on, guys? We have some interesting news today. For one, Strategy or MicroStrategy bought more Bitcoin, their weekly strategy. An announcement today of more Bitcoin purchasing. We also have some interesting news coming from a Bitcoin miner, Hut8, one of the only Bitcoin miners that's green today. And looking at the market in general today, you'll see that mostly what is green is somewhat of the safer stocks, the PGs, the Cokes, the Walmarts, Tesla down 4%, Nvidia down 4%, Netflix, Meta, Microsoft, Google down a bit. Now let's look at this MicroStrategy news, and then we'll talk about Hut8, and there's also some other things we want to look at. MSTR stock has acquired 22,048 Bitcoin for 1.92 billion at 86,969 per Bitcoin, and has achieved a yield of 11% year to date 2025. As of the end of March, Strategy holds 528,185 Bitcoin, acquired for 35.6 billion at an average price of 67,458 per Bitcoin. And you guys remember on their last update, they surpassed that 500,000 Bitcoin mark, and they're quickly working their way up to 600,000. I would not be surprised to see by the end of this year that they're getting awful close to 1 million Bitcoin held, probably a hair under. Now, as many of you know, we have the tariff announcement coming on April 2. Strategy's nearly $2 billion dip buy comes despite investor concerns related to the tariff announcement on April 2. Do you think Michael Saylor cares that Bitcoin's down a bit coming up to this coming up to this date? He's taking advantage. He's accumulating more Bitcoin. If Bitcoin was 110, 120, they would be acquiring less Bitcoin for their purchasing power. These are the times you want to buy. You want to buy when people are fearful, especially if you're looking at things long term. Michael Saylor is happy to buy when Bitcoin's down. Now, as said by Andrei Grachev, I'm horrible with names, you guys know that, managing partner of DWF Labs, said that this sell-off isn't the end of the bull run, it's a healthy reset. Markets overreacted to tariffs and macro headlines, but long-term fundamentals have not changed. Now, at the end of this article, it talks about how MicroStrategy might have to come up with taxes to pay for its unrealized gains of over 7.7 billion, which was at one time 19 billion in unrealized gains. Now, because of the corporate alternative minimum tax, MicroStrategy or Strategy would likely qualify for a 15% tax rate, but there's also still speculation that there may be an exemption for Bitcoin for taxes. Now, I'll believe that when I see it, but that would be fantastic for Bitcoin. Imagine how awesome it would be to not have to report unrealized gains. With that might come not being able to report unrealized losses, but you know, this all remains to be seen. We could see it, we could not see it. Who knows in the end? Now, here's something really interesting coming from Larry Fink's mouth. Blackrock CEO warns the dollar could lose reserve status to Bitcoin. The US dollar could risk losing its status as the world's reserve currency to Bitcoin if the US doesn't control its debt and deficits, said Larry Fink of Blackrock. We know Larry Fink, BlackRock, they love Bitcoin. We have a lot of Wall Street waking up to what Bitcoin really is. And Larry Fink wrote that the US has benefited from its national currency status as the world's reserve currency for decades. However, it's not guaranteed to last forever, as the national debt has grown at 3 times the pace of GDP since 1989. He further claimed that mandatory government spending and debt service will consume all federal revenue by 2030, creating a permanent deficit. If the US doesn't get its debt and deficit under control, the USD could lose its world reserve currency status to Bitcoin. Now, of course, Larry Fink patted himself on the back, highlighting the success of BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, IBIT. These spot Bitcoin ETFs hit Wall Street by storm. As of March 28, BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF holds $48 billion in assets under management, and it's only going to grow over the long term. And you know, recently we've been seeing spot inflows. Throughout most of early March, we were just seeing outflow after outflow. Well, finally at the end of March, we saw some consistent inflows. I do personally think that after we get to this April 2 tariff date, we will see a nice recovery. But of course, this depends on some of the details in the tariffs. If they are worse than people anticipate, sure, we might keep selling off. If they are somewhat more lax, somewhat less restrictive than we were thinking, then we might see a nice recovery. Now, here's something really interesting, and it has to do with Hut8. Donald Trump's family ventures into Bitcoin mining with the Hut8 partnership. And this specifically involving Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump. And in collaboration with Hut8, these two brothers will invest in American Bitcoin, which is going to be a company focused on mining Bitcoin. And these two firms basically formed an alliance. Hut8 will hold 80% of the new firm, with the Trump sons getting 20%. Now, this is not one way that the US is going to acquire Bitcoin, and American Bitcoin is unrelated to the recent executive order that Donald Trump signed to create a Bitcoin stockpile. Will we see more partnerships with some of the other Bitcoin miners? It's entirely possible. And you know, you have to realize, while people are fearful about these Bitcoin miners, some of our favorites are accumulating Bitcoin, and these companies, these public companies, in terms of their Bitcoin holdings, is only in many cases behind MicroStrategy, in some cases Tesla, and As a side note, in CleanSpark's next update, we will likely see them surpass Tesla in Bitcoin holdings. Then next will come Hut 8, which will mean basically MicroStrategy is the largest holder of Bitcoin. Then comes Mara, CleanSpark, Riot, Hut 8, mostly Bitcoin miners. And I think this trend will continue. We'll see most of these Bitcoin miners continue to accumulate more and more Bitcoin. And this may be a little hint of more things to come. Donald Trump noted that while buying Bitcoin is just half the story, mining Bitcoin opens up further opportunities for the enterprise and the American people. We may see some positive regulations for the Bitcoin miners. We may see some sort of tax breaks, some sort of incentives. The US wants to be the leader in Bitcoin mining. The US wants to be the top holder of Bitcoin. I do think we will see kind of a competition between some of the largest countries that hold Bitcoin, trying to stay on top. The US and China hold a very similar amount of Bitcoin. I do think they are going to continue to work to try to be the largest holder, with other smaller countries trying to follow suit. Now let's look at Hut 8 and how it reacted on this news. We are up 1%, while most of the Bitcoin miners are down 5% and more in some cases. And we have a couple trends that Hut 8 has been following. We have this uptrend that started since 2024 of January, so for over a year it has respected this. It is approaching it. If we break this, we will see a reaction from the market. But I mean, just look at this nice uptrend ever since January 2024. What's interesting is Hut 8 has not performed that well, especially compared to a lot of the other Bitcoin miners. Hut 8 from the bear market, from crypto winter low, the end of December 2022, okay? Hut 8 has only done a 200% from the beginning of the bear market, or from the end of the bear market. Massively underperforming Bitcoin. Now, Hut 8 doesn't just have an ascending trend to keep up on, but we also have this descending resistance that we have been continuing to respect. One thing we may see is if we see Hut 8 continue to sell off, we might end up seeing a bullish divergence here. And Hut 8 has seen bearish divergences that marked recent tops, and I'll show you in a second. But, if we see the RSI continue to climb, and if this price happens to hit, equal lows or even lower lows, this would be a bullish RSI divergence. The RSI has been oversold since earlier in March, and we may see some recovery after things wake up a bit. And now looking at these recent tops, you can see clear bearish divergences, a clear sign that we were topping out. 1, we were overbought. 2, we see the RSI cooling down while the price was still rising. Look at where this is compared to where this is. That is a clear divergence. We are seeing higher highs and we are seeing lower highs on the RSI. Same with this top here. This was basically a double top and we saw the RSI fall off a cliff. So keep an eye on the RSI for a bullish divergence. They typically work out better on longer term time frames, the daily. Now Hut 8 is one miner that is anticipating a loss. They're anticipating a small growth in revenue. Now I don't hold Hut 8, I'm not in Hut 8, I'm not really into Hut 8, but I will definitely keep an eye on it as it pertains to this new mining venture that they want to be a part of. But for now, I'm going to hold tight. I'm going to watch for a potentially breakout of this descending trend, or I'm going to watch a break of this ascending support. I do think the market will react to either. Now I want to quickly talk about Tesla. For when we do have this recent news, Tesla offers a 3-year interest-free loan for the refreshed Model Y in China, with also a 5-year interest-free loan for the Model 3 rear wheel and long range all-wheel drive before the same date, before April 30. All right. Now I'm curious, what do you guys think about the revamped Model 3 and the Model Y? I think the Model 3 looks pretty awesome. I think the back looks cool. The front looks cool. Getting to the Model Y front looks cool if you ask me. I think this is an upgrade. This looks pretty awesome. If you see it in person, I think it's pretty nice. The back is where they kind of lose me. If you see this in person, when this back light isn't lit up, it looks cheap and plasticky. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree if you have seen these in person. So I think they made a step forwards in terms of how the front looks, the headlights, kind of a more sleek look. However, the back, I think they took a step backwards. Yeah, here's the back. I mean, look at that. I think that just looks like crap if you ask me. I think this looks a lot more attractive. I do kind of like how the, you got this bit of a fin on the back, kind of a wannabe spoiler. That's kind of cool. But it's like, what are you going for? This almost has like a wannabe Dodge Charger look or something. And then with the lights lit up, it almost has like a wannabe Volvo, that kind of how the Volvos look with the taillights. I will say that the front does look pretty cool if you ask me. Now, as many of you know, if you've watched some recent videos, we saw that Tesla filled its gap that was established back in October of 2024. We did see a fill of that gap. Now, I'm still watching this downtrend. We did literally come up and test it before starting to sell off. And also this ascending level of support. You see a bounce here, and you did see, we tried to hold it up, but then we started selling off once you couldn't get it, and we basically came up and touched it as a resistance. These are 2 levels I'm watching. I think a break of this descending trend could bring us into a new uptrend. And this level that was previously a support for Tesla became a resistance. Now, while in my opinion, Tesla is still in a downtrend, If you like a stock like Tesla for the long term, eventually you have to take a bite at it. I mean, at one point it was down 55% from highs. Similarly to Bitcoin, Tesla dropped and bottomed out basically in 2022 in December. This is basically around the same time that Bitcoin bottomed out, the same time a lot of risk on bottomed out. One thing to think about is if the market continues to sell off, if we have more tariff fears, if the NASDAQ keeps selling off, Bitcoin will likely keep selling off. But what say you? Do you think Bitcoin will just go its own way? Do you think Bitcoin will be a store of value if we continue to see inflation ticking up? If we continue to have a Fed that's trying to wrangle inflation and get that inflation lower? Some people see Bitcoin as an inflation hedge. I do agree on the long term. Some people see Bitcoin as a potential recession hedge, which I tend to disagree on. But in reality, we don't know how Bitcoin would do in a recession. We have never gotten through one necessarily with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, in my opinion, was created because of the 2008 recession. But just because it was created possibly because of the 2008 recession and the issues with money, the issues with governments just always printing money, there's no end in sight there. It is always going to happen. That is what makes the world go round. Because of that, Bitcoin will continue to increase in value. In my opinion, over the long term, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. But we'll see how Bitcoin does in a recession if we do get one, if we do get there. I still believe in the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. I do think we are going to end this year higher in Bitcoin's price. Now I'll leave this article down below for you guys, but this goes into global M2, mentions a 107-day offset. The blast off spike is expected to kick off around April 30 based on mathematically strong correlation. If the M2 line continues its upward surge, the rally could last even longer. Don't get caught up in the weeds. The larger narrative is more important, reflected in the soaring global M2 levels, which could create an environment ripe for Bitcoin and other crypto assets to benefit from increased liquidity. The current trajectory of the global M2 money supply points to a rally above 140,000. In the end, governments will continue to print money, and Bitcoin will continue to benefit from it. But how are you guys feeling about Bitcoin today? The Bitcoin miners, what do you think about this Hut 8 news? Is Hut 8 going to become a top Bitcoin miner because of this recent news? How are you feeling about Tesla? Tesla's starting to get very cheap. I'm considering getting in again. What do you think about MicroStrategy? Are they going to get to 1 million Bitcoin by the end of this year, or is it going to take a little bit longer? Either way, we will continue to see these massive companies acquiring more Bitcoin, making it harder for people like you and I to buy cheap Bitcoin. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.